I'm Chris Erman, and this is Made of More, the show where we go beyond business to uncover real stories that shape entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, we explore the pivotal moments, the adversity faced, the risks taken, and the resilience found along the way. This isn't just about what people have built, it's about who they've become. If you're ready for inspiration, practical insights, and stories that remind you that you too are made of more, you're in the right place. Today, I'm honored to welcome a good friend of mine and a mentor, Robert Spector. He's a master storyteller, a foremost expert on the Nordstrom Way, a leading authority in the customer service culture. His books include The Nordstrom Way and his latest, The Century-Old Startup. These books have inspired business leaders around the world. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hi there, Chris. Good to be with you.
Hey, good to be with you too. Thanks for taking the time here. Really a great day for this. I just want to get into the beginning and where this all started from. Robert, where did you get your passion for storytelling?
Well, I grew up in a town called Perth Amboy, New Jersey, and that's across the Raritan Bay from Staten Island, New York, 29 miles from Times Square, and worked a good portion of my early life working in my parents' butcher shop, which led me later on in life to write a book called The Mom and Pop Store, but we can talk about that later. In school, I always was drawn to writing, and I remember specifically I was at a friend's house. I was maybe 8 or 9 or 10, somewhere in there, and we were writing something, and I was telling him where the commas went. Again, I'm just a little kid, but his mother mentioned, she said, Robert, you're really good at all this. You know how to punctuate and where all the commas go. And like it happened many decades ago, but that's always stuck with me as kind of didn't realize it at the time, but it was a turning point that moved me in the direction of writing.
Nice. So, once you started realizing that and your parents were realizing that with you, what was the next step?
Well, as I got older, I didn't really have anything published until I was in the 8th grade when we had our yearbook for the 8th grade, and the teacher assigned different topics for the students. So I got sports, so I got a chance to write about sports for the grammar school yearbooks. That was the first time I was published. Then I got to high school the next year. We had a 4-year high school, and somebody mentioned something about the school newspaper. I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. So I joined the school newspaper, and I was on the sports staff. And my big epiphany was when I got a chance to cover my high school football team at our home stadium, and I covered it for the 2 big daily newspapers in New Jersey and a local radio station. I walked in there, and I said, you can get in, if you're a journalist, you can get into stuff for free.
Right.
I said, yeah, that was my big aha. And
your defining moment.
I've been doing it ever since. So, working for these newspapers, so I would be out on the field covering the team and keeping track of the statistics. And after the game, I would get a quote from the coach, and I would say how many yards somebody gained, how many tackles one particular person made. And I would call up the newspapers and the radio station. A lot of other kids just like me were doing it for their high schools. And the score, the stars of the game, and a quote from the coach. And I got, $5 for it or whatever, but I was a professional.
Yeah. And, well, $5, was that a lot back then too for you, or?
Yes. Hey, it's still a lot for me right now.
That's great.
And then I was the sports columnist for my paper as I, got up in years and in high school. I had summer jobs working for the local parks department in Perth Amboy, where we would do a 2-sided sheet of paper. Back then, there's a thing called mimeographing. And so I'd write on goings on in the parks, and I would create a crossword puzzle and do a couple of things, and I would hand that out. So I had these writing jobs at a very early age. And so as I got through high school, after being the sports columnist, one of the things that my local paper had was high school correspondence all over. I grew up in Middlesex County in New Jersey, which is right in the middle of the state. And so every Saturday, they'd have in the newspaper what they call a double truck. So they're two big pages of people from different high schools talking about what was going on in their high school that week, if they had an assembly or if they had a big game. So our team was called the Panthers. So the title of the column was Panther Topics. And not only do you have the story, you got your picture in the newspaper. Nice. And in my earlier years, I rotated it with one or two other people. And then by my senior year, I did it all. So I had a weekly column with my picture in the paper. And that was pretty cool. I had summer jobs working for my local paper. I would get in. I was, again, a sports writer. So I would get in at 5 o'clock in the evening. And the day shift had left at 5 and the night shift got in at 7. And I'd be there to answer the phone from 5 to 7, people calling up either for classified ads or circulation. And I would say, I'd answer the phone and say, call back tomorrow at 9. So I did that for a couple of hours. And then the sports staff would start to come in. And then we'd get phone calls from Little League, people running Little League games and little higher Babe Ruth League games and American Legion baseball games and tennis tournaments. And they would give me the details. And I would write these short little stories, First Bank and Trust beat Perry Brothers Furniture 4-2. Joe Smith hit a home run and Sam Jones got a home run too. And so it was that kind of thing. It was great.
Yes, that's pretty
training.
Exciting. That sounds really.
Yeah, but you didn't have to. I've never had a writer's block. I haven't had to agonize on what should I write next. I had all the details. I just had to write it up in the story. And then if I would kind of be thinking back, reflecting, trying to phrase something a little different, the night sports editor would look at me and said, Spector, put a period on it and get it to me.
Right. Hey, I'm curious, like as a young man and as a boy, that you were experiencing a lot of success and things outside of the norm. What did your personal life look like during this time? Did your friends just love the fact that you, as a young man in school, that you were able to participate in all these things, or did it set you apart a bit?
Well, it both made me apart and it also made me a part of the group. So they liked the fact that I was writing stuff and I might be able to get their name in the newspaper. So that always makes you a little more popular. Yeah. And, I'm talking with some old friends, people I've known since the first grade, and they would say, you always knew what you wanted to do, even at that young age. And so I was really lucky. My hometown afforded me so many opportunities to do work. So the summers that I was writing a local paper, I got a job. No, actually, this was still in high school. I got a job. They asked me if I knew how to write a press release. And I'm like 15 at the time. I don't even know what a press release is. But I said, well, tell me what, show me what one looks like. And I would, because the Parks Department would put on, Broadway shows, with an amateur cast. So we had Gypsy one year. And so I'd write stuff about that. And then my hometown would have a big tennis tournament. And it was right around the time every year of the U.S. Open in Forest Hills. So the people who were eliminated from Forest Hills would drive to my hometown, so it's less than an hour drive, and they would play in that tournament. So we had some very famous players like Arthur Ashe and a guy named Rod Laver, who was very, very big champion back then. And so I learned how to write press releases and do all these things. And ever since then, I've done a lot of different kinds of writing. I've written game shows, I've written comedy, I've written radio spots. I always figured that if I could learn the form, I could figure out how to do it.
What about during so much experience and so much, it sounds like you were just learning along the way, but during any of this time, did you have any mentors that you were looking up to or checking in with?
One of the things in my life that I wish that I had that I've never had was a mentor. I searched for a mentor and never quite found one. So in some ways, I was my own mentor. I was figuring it out as I went along and I ultimately realized that nobody I know had the same path that I had.
Yeah,
And so there wasn't anybody who'd say, when I was your age and I was trying to do what you did, this is what I was just figuring it out.
right.
And when you figure out, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So sometimes you hit a success, sometimes you fall flat on your face.
Yeah, it brings me to the next question. If you didn't have any mentors, I know you're driven, you realize that you had a path, then you must have had some strong goals. You must have identified your goals early on.
I had two goals in mind. Neither had to do with finances. I wanted to lead an interesting life. That
Yeah, I
was
remember you
number
saying
one.
that.
The number two is I wanted to be respected by my peers for my work. And I always knew that I had a destiny. And I didn't know what form that destiny was going to take, but I knew that I was going to do something that people would eventually say, "Oh, you're the guy who did that." And so fast forward, after my Nordstrom book came out, and I was on a plane, and we just landed, and everybody's getting up to get off the plane. I had been talking to the person sitting next to me, and I'm already standing up. Everybody's in the aisle, you know how it is, and we're trying to get off the plane, and I mentioned the Nordstrom Way while I'm standing up. So the person in the seat right in front of me looks up and says, "You're the guy who wrote the Nordstrom Way?"
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, there you go. I always wanted to, "Oh, you're that guy." So that's what I achieved. I am
You
that
checked
guy.
the box. You checked the
Yeah.
box. When you knew you wanted to lead an interesting life, did you know what that meant at the time you set that goal?
No.
No.
I thought it might be show business, meeting famous people. And that's a part of it. I crossed paths with a lot of well-known people over the course of my time. And that might have been part of my issue, was I didn't quite know, if you stay on this path and you go that way, this is what's going to happen. I didn't have that. I was freelancing. I was jamming. I was making it up as I went along.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured that if you're in the game, good things will happen to you. So you can't just say, "Gee, I would like to do this. I would hope I would do that." You got to get into the game.
Just do something? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Just
Yeah, you have to see, you have to measure yourself against others and see if you have what it takes. So after I got out of college, I moved into New York City, Greenwich Village, with a couple of buddies that I grew up with, and I set out to become a writer.
And you've done really well. What about respect from your peers? You want to elaborate on that a little bit? What that meant to you?
When I was on my high school paper, and I remember going to a conference for high school newspapers, and they had different awards, and so I was up for best sports column, and they announced the names. So the first, second, and third place winners got up on stage. Then they had two honorable mentions. So I was honorable mention, and which really irritated me, because I knew that I was better. I wrote a better column than those people did, but apparently the judges didn't agree. So it was just about, it was something that I was known for. I ended up being the editor of the yearbook, and then when I was in college, I wrote for the college paper. It was just something that I knew that I was good at. I don't have a whole lot of talents. I don't cook. I can't fix a car. I'm not the kind of guy that you would ask to do stuff like that. But I do have a talent in writing, and I used to say that I was a one-trick pony.
And you knew that. You knew that pretty early in life?
Yeah, I realized that, and then I had no artistic ability. So I used to say I'm a one-trick pony, and then when I eventually became a speaker, I said, well, now I'm a two-trick pony.
All right.
So I've doubled the amount of tricks that I can do from one to two.
Hey, that's more than a lot of us. So it's nice that you, and the fact that you could identify that, that you were only good at one thing and then eventually good at another. It's better than thinking you're great at 10 things and not great at anything.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I didn't only do that. I played sports. I was on the varsity basketball team. I played freshman and junior varsity baseball. I ran track for a year. I was on the student council. So I was a pretty all-around kind of guy. And I loved high school. And most people I know hated high school, couldn't wait to get out of high school. But I have an older sister, and she was also the editor of her yearbook. Mm-hmm. And so I followed her. And, nice. It was just so enjoyed high school. And I'm the first person in my class to be inducted into the Perth Amboy High School Hall of Fame. So that's
a great way to wrap. Thank you for sharing everything. Let's wrap up. We're going to go into commercial time, but thank you for sharing the first segment of your early origins. When we get back, we're going to get into mastering your craft and the questions around that. And you're listening to Made of More on KKNW.
Hear that? That's the sound of your life. Perfectly imperfect. Beating in rhythm to the world you've created. But every time you drive after drinking, the music gets drowned out. Your life sounds pretty great. Don't let a buzz ruin it. Buzz driving is drunk driving. Don't drive buzzed. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hello, I'm Chris Erman. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creative minds, and game changers to uncover the real stories behind their business. On my show, Made of More, we explore the challenges that they've overcome, the breakthroughs that they've celebrated, and the mindset that drives them forward. If you're ready to unlock your full entrepreneurial potential, Made of More is the show for you, because here we know you are made of more. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW.
The more you listen to your kids, the closer you'll be. So we asked kids, what do you want your parents to hear?
I feel sometimes that I'm not listened to. I would just want you to listen to me more often and evaluate situations with me and lead me towards success.
We're not adults, so just be there and listen. I just want someone to yap to. And I just feel like I'll be fine if someone just hears me talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk.
You're doing a really good job. And I don't think I tell you that enough. And I know sometimes we get into it and it's just hard on both of us. But, try to understand me more and I'll try to do the same.
Listening is a form of love. Find resources to help you support your kids and their emotional well-being at sounditouttogether.org. That's sounditouttogether.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Pivotal.
Don't ask me to talk.
There's a lot of talk out there. Political talk, sports talk, girl talk, trash talk, and so on. But there's only one, Don't Ask Me to Talk, helmed by conversational off-roaders and podcast pals Eric Ryder and Stacey Heller. They follow every tangent they encounter, from cultural blind spots to their infamous weekly Wheelo topics. Listen wherever you listen to your fave podcasts. Subscribe and share too. Or tune in every Saturday at 3 p.m. or Tuesday at 4 p.m. on KKNW.
No other station delivers this much variety. Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Made of More. I'm your host, Chris Erman, and I'm here with Robert Spector. Hey, Robert, welcome back, and thank you for just giving us your origin stories and your youth and whatnot. I want to transition a little bit with your name becoming synonymous with Nordstrom brand and excellent service. Let's dive into that a little bit more. So you've been known as you've been called the Nordstrom Whisperer at one point in time. You want to comment on that?
I have to thank my good friend, Susan Rowan, who's an author and a speaker as well. She wrote the book, How to Work a Room and Secrets of Savvy Networking. And she coined that phrase for me, and I kind of like it. So I'll give you the abridged version of my Nordstrom connection. I had been a trade journalist for a group of newspapers out of New York under the umbrella of Fairchild Publications. Their best known paper is Women's Wear Daily. They also had a menswear paper, one that covered footwear, supermarkets, home furnishings, etc. And I had been a staff writer for one of the papers in New York. And when I moved to Seattle, I became what's known as a stringer. A stringer is a regular contributor, not a salaried employee. So you get paid by the article. So Seattle was on the rise. This is the early 80s. So we're talking about quite a while ago. And so there were companies that were starting to rise up, one of them being Nordstrom, and I would cover them and write about their earnings, and they're opening new stores. So back in 1990, I had written some other retail books. So there was a department store in Seattle called Frederick and Nelson, which is actually where the Nordstrom store is now in downtown Seattle. I did their corporate history. So I had a reputation for writing about retail. I was contracted by a literary agent named Elizabeth Wales, whose next door neighbor was a fellow named Pat McCarthy, who sold men's suits in the downtown Seattle store, and he was the number one salesman 15 years in a row.
Wow.
Outfitted entire law firms and accounting firms. So she was initially approached me about being a ghostwriter for Pat. It was going to be his story, the story told from the sales floor up as opposed to the boardroom down. Put together a 10,000 word proposal, sample chapters, chapter outline. We shopped it around to New York publishers. Nobody was interested.
Okay.
At that time, Nordstrom did not have much of a presence on the East Coast. And especially, so they weren't in New York. They were just starting to be in New Jersey, outside the city. But having grown up in the New York area and lived in New York, I can tell you that there's no more provincial spot on the planet than the island of Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
It is an island. So for book editors, if it's not within Midtown or within their line of sight, it's regional. So eventually the project evolved from my being the ghostwriter to it being my book. And I was able to get the Nordstrom family and company to cooperate with me. Mm-hmm. And years after that phone call, the book came out. 5 years.
So 5 years.
But I knew, and I got a tiny advance. I probably made $1.25 an hour, maybe, working on this. But I knew I had the story. Nordstrom had been written up in Harvard Business School, a case study, but nobody had really told the story. I had the story. So I was going to make this thing work. I eventually helped to make it a bestseller. So I'd worked in public relations, so I knew how to promote things, knew how to market things. So since my publisher had virtually no expectations for this book, I had to first sell the publisher. So I was at a point in life, I was in my late 40s. I made a list of everybody that I knew as I was coming up I could call up and ask for a favor. Mm-hmm. And so I made a list of people. So I wanted to get really good testimonial blurbs for the book. Excuse me. As an example, a woman I had worked with at this PR firm, at this point, now we're talking about many years later, she's the vice president for international public relations at Estee Lauder. The guy who ran the company back then was Estee Lauder's son, Leonard Lauder. I said, could you get me Leonard Lauder to do a testimonial blurb for me? She did. I had a friend of mine, a former Nordstrom executive named Betsy Sanders. She was on the board of Walmart. And at that time, the guy named David Glass was the chairman and CEO of Walmart. I said, could you get me David Glass to give me a testimonial? Got it. That I knew in Seattle who he went to work for the JW Marriott hotel chain. I said, could you get me JW Marriott to give me a testimonial blurb? So I can say this now. Now, they asked me for a few different samples, mm-hmm. which I wrote, and they signed off on it. So wow. Even though it says JW Marriott on the back of the blurb, I'm the one who wrote it. And then I also had the other people I knew. So I knew Howard Schultz of Starbucks, so he wrote a testimonial for me. And I just looked at every angle, and I knew that I was going to make this thing work. And the odds were not in my favor again, because the publisher didn't put any money behind it. So it was all me. And I could get into a million other details. I don't want to bore your audience, but I made it a bestseller. Wow. And it was on the Business Week bestseller list for 17 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I started getting requests for speaking. It's taken me around the world. I've spoken in 27 countries. And I've done a lot of podcasts in the past year with people in Egypt, in Italy, in Greece, and in Russia.
Wow. I love that you're touching on these testimonials, and first that there are people not believing in you, but you believed in this so much. And obviously there's quite a bit of people that believed in you during this time to write testimonials for you. I'm curious, during the 5 years that it took you to do this, like, it sounds like you were probably, how were you surviving? How'd you make money just to keep going?
Well, I was still writing for the Fairchild papers. I also did a lot of corporate histories. The kind of corporate histories I write, these are hardcover coffee table books that are commissioned by a company to commemorate a particular significant anniversary. So it could be the 100-year anniversary, or 75, 125 or so, with lots of pictures. And so I did a lot of those. Mm-hmm. So between the stories that I did for Fairchild Publications and then these corporate histories, that's how I was surviving.
Well, it sounds like you were burning candles at both ends at some times.
Yes, if candles had more than two ends, I'd be burning that one too.
Yeah, I can see that. Why do you believe in the value-driven business so much? What is it that made you see that?
I grew up in a values-driven business. So my father had this butcher shop in an outdoor farmer's market in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, and it was a typical immigrant family business. My family came from Ukraine, so my grandfather, my father, my uncle, my cousins, my sisters, and we all worked there. And we had a couple of non-family members who worked there as well. So when you're at a small mom and pop business, I mean, that is ground zero for commerce, for retail, for customer service, for interaction with the customer. And we didn't have a huge business. I don't know how many regular customers we had. I'm sure maybe 70, 75, I don't know, but there were people who could have gone to other butchers. So why did they go to my father? And there were a couple of major supermarkets literally a block away.
Sure.
And well, because most of his customers were Eastern European immigrants like himself. So he could sell his wares in Ukrainian and Russian and various Slavic languages, maybe a little Hungarian, and he would carry specialty ethnic foods that immigrants from Eastern Europe would be looking for. So you give them the products that they miss, you speak their language, and that's a good part of it. Plus, my father had a very good sense of humor. The Yiddish word for being able to talk and converse is schmooze. Schmooze. And my father was an excellent schmoozer. And then years later, I wrote a book called The Mom and Pop Store, which is part memoir of working in the butcher shop. And I interviewed a gentleman who worked for my father. Our big market day was Saturday. You made your whole money that week from Saturday. And so he was hired. And I said, "What did my father tell you when he hired you?" And he said, "He told me to be honest." Mm-hmm. How's that for cutting edge?
Yeah, that's
business?
Very grounded.
Yeah, you go to a butcher shop in the old days, and you're looking in the showcase, and you say, "Robert, I want that steak," that one right up front. And so I take out the steak and I put some wax paper on the scale, and the wax paper will fall over the scale. If you're dishonest, you just pull down on that piece of paper, and suddenly it's a few ounces more.
Sure.
But we didn't do that. So my father ran an honest, upright business. Your reputation is everything. It was called Spector's Meat Market. So Spector's name is on there. So, I mean, that's something, since I've been an independent entrepreneur, all I have is my good name. And all any of us have, business, whether we're on our own or we're working with somebody else, all we have is our good name. And that's precious. And that's valuable.
That's forgotten sometimes.
Right. And if you besmirch that name, it's very hard, almost impossible to get it back.
Well, what a good lesson right here. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really great story. I love it about the little paper falling off the end there. And it's a no-brainer, but it is something that a lot of people have to remember even today, right?
Yeah.
Leads me to my next question is like, what do you think modern companies today can kind of learn from everything you were just talking about?
Well, the kind of stuff, Chris, that I talk about is so old-fashioned and so retro. I tell my audiences, I'm not telling you stuff you don't already know. Mm-hmm. But I'm from out of town, and I've got a PowerPoint, so that makes me an expert. But you tell people to be nice, to be honest, to listen to the customer. If there's a problem, care of it. Customers can be very forgiving if the service or the product has not met their expectations. If you make sure that you do it right, you fix it. I mean, we all make mistakes, but how you react to fixing that and making sure that it doesn't happen again. In talking to people who worked for my grandfather in the butcher shop. So if you had a problem, if he made a mistake or whatever, we also sold bread and rolls and stuff. So he'd give you a rye bread. Just, I'm sorry that happened. Here, take this. So, I mean, that's the moment of truth. And I speak on customer service, and customer service never goes out of style. And it doesn't matter because every generation needs to learn it. It's simple as just it's nothing more complicated than the golden rule. It's putting yourself in the shoes of the customer. And if you're selling homes, you don't want to sell a home because it's the most expensive one on the market and you'll get a bigger commission. You want to make sure that home is right for this person, that they can afford it, and all those good things. So it's not a me experience, it's a we experience.
I love that you say that. Everything that you talk about, and the reason why I look up to you, and is everything that you teach is very digestible. It's very grounded and something that I think everybody is capable of doing, but you have your way of just wrapping it up into these, I'd say these grounded, and I don't want to say simple, but everybody can understand these and relate to your stories. And I think that's part of the reason why you're very successful is because you're relatable.
Well, thank you. And I don't mind calling it simple. It is simple. Mm-hmm. It's the execution that's the hard part.
Okay. Yeah. The execution. We only have a couple more minutes till we go into the next segment, but I do want to ask, what is the biggest misconception of business leaders have about being in the world-class service culture today? What's the biggest misconception?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is that they don't trust and they don't empower their frontline people to make good decisions for the benefit of the customer. If it's just the bottom line, mm-hmm. that's not going to make for a long-term successful business.
And that's when we see them fail, that flash in the pan, right?
I mean, the retail graveyard is filled with once powerful stores that either no longer exist or are severely diminished.
Yeah, we've seen some big stores that were popular for decades fade out, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, past performance is no guarantee of future success.
Past performance is no guarantee of future success. I love that. We're going to leave that right there. This is Made of More. You've been listening to me with Robert Spector. I'm Chris Erman, your host, and tune back in.
The more you listen to your kids, the closer you'll be. So we asked kids, what do you want your parents to hear?
I feel sometimes that I'm not listened to. I would just want you to listen to me more often and evaluate situations with me and lead me towards success.
Listening is a form of love. Find resources to help you support your kids and their emotional well-being at sounditouttogether.org. That's sounditouttogether.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Pivotal.
Hey JD, do you want to have a better life?
Yeah, doesn't everybody?
Yes, we do. How do I go about doing that?
A good place to start would be listening to our new show, Staying Power.
What's it about?
It's about all the ways we can overcome the challenges that we sometimes put in front of ourselves to live a better life.
Where can I find it?
You can listen to it on 1150 AM KKNW every Wednesday at 4 p.m. and Fridays at 9 a.m. or wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's do this together every week on Staying Power.
Most people out here think that taking care of one another is important. And most people would step up for a neighbor going through a tough time. Most people around here help out friends and family when they need it. But the funny thing is, most of us won't look for help when we need it. If you're struggling with mental health, you should know that there are resources out there that can help. And it's okay to talk about it if you need to. One place to get started with information is loveyourmindtoday.org. Loveyourmindtoday.org offers a range of guides, instructions, and insights for dealing with difficult situations or getting through a tough time. If you're struggling with mental health, get the help you need, because most people out here really care. Visit loveyourmindtoday.org. That's loveyourmindtoday.org. Brought to you by the Huntsman Mental Health Institute and the Ad Council.
Hello, I'm Chris Erman. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creative minds, and game changers to uncover the real stories behind their business. On my show, Made of More, we explore the challenges that they've overcome, the breakthroughs that they've celebrated, and the mindset that drives them forward. If you're ready to unlock your full entrepreneurial potential, Made of More is the show for you, because here we know you are made of more. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW.
Bringing good vibes to the Puget Sound and the world. Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Made of More. I'm Chris Erman, your host, and I'm here with Robert Spector. We were just talking about being the Nordstrom Whisperer and going through all those motions there. So is there anything that you want to say before, as we go into the next segment here, Robert?
Well, I think I'm very thankful to Nordstrom as a company and the Nordstrom family, giving me unprecedented access to the inner workings of the company. And part of that is you have to gain trust of people, and you don't violate that trust. So I've always said that I treat my relationship with them like a piece of fine crystal. You don't want to drop it because it's going to shatter into a whole lot of little pieces. And that's kind of, certainly given me credibility in other, certainly with other companies and other countries. No one else has written. I know people who have written books on Starbucks or Ritz-Carlton, or there might have been more than one, or on Amazon. No one else has written another Nordstrom book because they know that I am the guy.
You are the guy.
I always wanted to be the guy, and now I'm the guy.
You did it.
Yeah.
That was a great goal. I just want to contest to that. The way that you talk about treating the Nordstrom's relationship, I just have to say, I've seen you in many other friendships and business relationships, and it just seems like you consistently show up the same way that you speak about how you did with the Nordstrom family, even with just everyday people. It's pretty wonderful to see.
Well, one of the things that I've learned is that I can't be anybody other than myself. So when I'm speaking one-on-one with you, either in person or electronically, I'm the same person who's speaking to 500 people in an auditorium. I'm bigger because I have to project out to them, but I'm the same guy. And I'm not the first person to think about this, but if you're true to yourself and you're honest, you don't have to pretend. You are, this is you, and good, bad, or indifferent, So I enjoy it. I enjoy talking like this. I enjoy speaking to a large group of people. I'd like to have a good time. I want them to have a good time too. So I use a lot of humor in my presentations. I don't tell jokes, because if you tell a joke and it dies, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
So the humor has to come out through the material.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're great at that. And this is a good lesson to teach, to tell everybody, especially the young ones that are thinking about getting in business and maybe they don't have a role model. I think you just said a major piece of gold here is always show up as yourself. And so you don't have to pretend. So when you're with your big client or you're with your friends or just buying something from over the counter, to always show up as yourself. And hopefully the person that you're showing up as is you're showing up with a good heart and kindness.
And one other thing that's important, and it's simple, but people don't do it, is listen. Hear, but listen to what the other person is saying, because most of us do not listen. We're waiting for that blowhard who's talking to finish up so we can then offer our words of wisdom. Mm-hmm. But yeah, especially if you're in sales, you got to listen to what the customer has, all the answers. All you have to ask them and listen and weigh and evaluate what they've just said. See the best fit for them, whether it's a house or a suit or whatever.
Whatever it is.
Listening is the most important thing.
Why is it so hard? I mean, as you're speaking about it, it rings true, and I love what you're saying, and I agree 100%. But why is it that we always have to be reminded about that we have to listen?
Well, because we're focused on what we have to say. And whatever pearls of wisdom that we have. If you're feeling insecure, you're going to want to pipe up with something. It may not be appropriate. You may be stepping on something that somebody is saying, and you're not taking in that information and evaluating it so you can help that customer make the right choice.
Mm-hmm. I could feel as you talk about it, I've already known about it, probably because I've heard it from you many times, and it just makes a lot of sense. But I want to take this next moment to really talk about the century-old startup. Can you tell me about this name? It's such a unique name, the century-old startup.
Well, I would love to, because it is my latest book. So, I've written 4 books called The Nordstrom Way, which I call the Nordstrom Way series. So I did the original book in 1995. I did brand new versions in 2005, 2012, and 2017. Fast forward, so during COVID, when the Nordstrom stores were closed and the offices were closed, the 2 brothers who run the company, Eric and Pete Nordstrom, would do a Zoom call to all employees every Friday. And they would give them an update on this is what's happening with the company. This is when we plan on reopening. When we reopen, we're going to have social distancing, and we're going to do all those things so the customers will feel comfortable coming in and shopping with us as they venture out into the public again. And they would invariably end their Zoom talks with, our company has been in business since 1901. We've endured the Great Recession, the Great Depression, various recessions, 2 world wars, et cetera, and we're still here, and we are going to survive this as well. So I said to myself, well, that's a book. So I went through all of my books on Nordstrom, the Nordstrom family, the founder, John W., his son of the 2nd generation, and Bruce of the 3rd generation, all did their own books. I helped Bruce, who is the father of the guys who are running it now. I helped him with his memoir. So I took all this stuff and I looked for common themes. And I came up with an acronym that fulfills everything that a company needs to do in order to stay relevant. As I said, because Nordstrom has been around for 124 years. There'll be 125 next year. They started out as a single shoe store in downtown Seattle. And 120 so years later, they are the most important luxury retailer in the United States, with clothing and cosmetics and jewelry. And they're in New York City. They're the most important, not Neiman Marcus, not Bloomingdale's, not Saks Fifth Avenue, Nordstrom. Mm-hmm. That's an amazing.
Why is that?
Well, they stay true to who they are. They take care of the customer. And that's not just not being nice. It's having the right product at the right time at the right price. And just always having the customer in focus. So because they are changing and they think like a startup. A startup is always challenging, it's successful. They're always challenging what they're doing. What can we do better? What can we do differently? What can we do that the competition is not doing? That's a part of the foundation of Nordstrom. So I came up with this acronym of FACTS, F-A-C-T-S. F is for flexibility. Especially in a time like COVID, and you really have to adjust on the job. A is for agility. You have to be, and there is slight difference between flexibility and agility. Agility is being able to adapt. You've got all these different circumstances happening, some of them unprecedented. How do you adapt to a pandemic when you're a retailer and you have all these other issues? So F for flexibility, A for agility, C for communication. I mean, that's part of listening, part of what we were talking about. The great playwright George Bernard Shaw, the founder of the London School of Economics, said the biggest mistake in communication is the illusion it has taken place.
Talk about that. What is it? What do you mean the illusion?
Well, because we think just because we've exchanged some information, that doesn't mean that we've communicated. That doesn't necessarily mean that you've heard what I'm saying and you're absorbing it and then following through. But it's the most important thing. If you have a question when somebody either texts you or you did whatever, is this what you meant? As opposed to assuming, well, I think that he or she meant this. Ask the extra question. It'll save you a whole lot of time.
So I hear something there. It's not so much what somebody said, it's what they meant.
Right. And making sure that you understand what they said. So again, flexibility, agility, communication, transformation. And the Nordstrom story is all about transformation. Again, a little shoe store downtown to Seattle to a 380,000 square foot store in Midtown Manhattan. That's quite a jump. And so that's why I called it the century-old startup, because it is an interesting title. Well, how could a startup be 100 years old or more than 100 years old? Well, that's how you have to think. That's how you have to approach your business. And I used to teach a class at Western Washington University here in Bellingham, Washington, to junior and senior marketing majors. And it's called Retail Reinvention. Everything old is new again. And I had them, for their class project, find a retailer that was once very important, dominant, that either no longer exists or is severely diminished. Tell me how and why they succeeded and how and why they failed. So you've got companies like Borders Books and Circuit City and Blockbuster Video and, all these things. Sears department store. Sears could have been Amazon. Sears had the everything set up, the infrastructure, they had the stores, they had the system, but they weren't, because they only knew what they knew. So they stuck to their business. And so the main thing, how and why these companies failed, is that they did not adapt. They were fighting the last war as opposed to the current war.
So a question that I have is, like Sears how long was Sears around? It was around for some time, wasn't it?
Sears has been around probably 150 years.
So 150 years. So I would say they did adapt for 150 years. Like, what do you think was the last, what made them stop adapting?
Well, you could have a whole lot of theories, but I think people just get comfortable. And they were going along great. We got great market share. We've got good margins. Hey, everything's cool. But
I'd imagine leadership has probably changed hands a few times over that 150 years.
Yeah. They've been a public company for a very long time, but you should never be satisfied with who you are. Bezos talks about, he doesn't want Amazon to ever feel comfortable, ever feel that they've made it. When I did a book on Amazon, which came out 25 years ago this month, and Bezos back then said that Amazon is still in chapter 1. And 25 years later, they're still in chapter 1. So the obvious question is, what does chapter 2 look like? This is still chapter 1. And essentially he says chapter 2 is you ended up not putting everything you can into your business and eventually you become irrelevant. That's why it's always day one. Did I say chapter one? I meant to say day one.
Day one. I like that. Always think like it's day one.
Right.
Things are changing ever so quickly, especially with technology and AI today.
Yeah. And Amazon started out just selling books. Now they sell everything. And they have cloud computing and all this. And it's never being satisfied that you've made it. There's a line from, I'm a big Grateful Dead fan. So there's a line from Uncle John's band. The first days are the hardest days. Don't you worry anymore. When life looks like Easy Street, there's danger at your door.
That's deep. Thank you for sharing that. I think you said it, but is there anything else that you think, or let me rephrase that, what other lessons do you think that are most critical in this book for companies today?
Well, that is the most important thing. It doesn't matter what kind of business that you are in. Most of the groups that I speak to are not in retail. They're in real estate, they're in financial services, they're in healthcare. I've spoken to every kind of business you can imagine, from language translation to extruded plastics. It doesn't matter. If you have a customer, whether it's an internal customer or an external customer, you have to worship that customer and do whatever you can to keep that customer, because everybody in business knows it's a lot more expensive to get a new customer than it is to retain an old customer.
Sure. That's a good lesson right there. Well, Robert, I want to thank you for coming on the show, Made of More, and showing people that you're made of more and your stories behind it. And that you, after all this time of success, that you still have that urge inside you to set yourself apart and help other businesses keep growing and be aware and keep showing up. And I love that you want to help see other companies just stay relevant and successful, to the fact that you're still writing books that are with gold nuggets lined through it. And how can we find you? So what's the best way to find you, and who do you want to help?
Well, the best way to find me is to go to my website, which is robertspector.com. And there'll be more about me than you'll need to know in a single lifetime. There's a short video of my talking about things I've done and are doing. And they can find me on your radio show here.
All right. Well, stay tuned. I'm sure I'm going to want to interview you again down the road. You have so much more to offer, and whoever can listen to a little bit of you, I think they're going to benefit a lot, and hopefully other companies are going to get you in the door and speak into them. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Made of More on KKNW. Whether you're on the road, at the office, or listening from home, keep chasing what lights you up, keep building what matters, and never settle for less than the life you were made for. You are made of more. More purpose, more impact, more joy. Made of More is part of the Speaking Current network of shows and podcasts, all of which that are dedicated to inspiring listeners to build lives of meaning, connection, and value. You can find the Speaking Current network of shows, including Made of More, wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on YouTube. Until next Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I'm Chris Erman. Stay bold, stay inspired, and stay made of more.